Cave Cat again with another great episode of Cave Cat's movie and TV reviews. For today's episode, the show that I'm about to talk about has a concept that may seem familiar to another show that I already reviewed before, but it's actually a little different. How different, do you ask? Well, the show that I'll be reviewing today is The Greatest Adventure: Stories from the Bible. So that's right, this is the fifth time that I'll be reviewing a Christian series, after having done reviews for VeggieTales, Superbook, McGee and Me, and even Adventures in Odyssey. However, the surprising thing about the show is that it was actually produced by Hanna-Barbera, in a near similar vein and tone as that of such shows as Johnny Quest, Space Ghost, or even the Herculoids. Bet you didn't think that Hanna-Barbera would actually create a Christian series, did you? To start things off, The Greatest Adventure is actually a direct-to-video series that was first released in 1985. Though 17 years prior to that, Joe Barbera conceived the idea for the show, yet he had difficulty trying to get any support for the show. Eventually, though, Taft Broadcasting, the former parent company of Hanna-Barbera, agreed to provide funding for the show, and thus The Greatest Adventure: Stories from the Bible was born. As for what the show is about, well, according to the opening narration, two young archaeologists named Derek and Margot, along with their nomad friend Moki, are out on an archaeological dig when all of a sudden they end up trapped in a whirlpool of sand that sends them right down to the bottom. And once the dust has settled, they end up discovering that they've landed in a large chamber filled with relics and artifacts from long ago, until discovering a door at the far end of the cavern, the door revealed to be a portal that transports the trio back in time, where they end up in a different Bible story in each episode. Yeah, the plot and premise are pretty similar to that of Superbook, but it's still a different show, being that this was produced in America, whereas Superbook was produced in Japan, at least until the 2011 reboot of the latter, which we're not supposed to talk about here. While both the show and Superbook do focus on a trio of characters traveling back in time to witness various Bible stories as they play out, the characters used are very different, with Superbook having two children and a robot as the characters sent back in time to witness the Bible stories, while this show has three young people be the ones to go back in time and see the Bible stories play out as well. And each of the three main characters actually play off of each other very well, with Derek being the leader of the trio and the one who usually comes up with plans to get him and his friends out of danger, Margot being the only female of the group who tends to act as the voice of reason to the others, and Moki being the youngest and the most eager of the trio, albeit with a tendency to get himself into trouble, especially when it comes to food. So in a way, Moki could possibly be like a cross between Haji from Johnny Quest and Shaggy from the Scooby-Doo franchise. As mentioned before, each episode of the show has Derek, Margot, and Moki get sent to a different period during biblical times, where they end up witnessing a different Bible story firsthand, even meeting up with the different biblical figures or a bystander who was a witness to said event. In fact, the stories that we've seen covered in this series range from Adam and Eve, Noah's Ark, Joseph, Moses, Joshua, David and Goliath, Samson, Daniel, Jonah, Queen Esther, the Nativity, the miracles of Jesus, and especially the death and resurrection of Jesus. Before anyone asks, yes, I am aware that these stories were also covered in Superbook, and the same thing is true with VeggieTales also covering some of those stories as well. As a kid, I remember owning quite a few VHS tapes of several episodes, up until we gave them away when I was about to start high school. And as for my thoughts on the show, I actually remember liking it a lot when I was younger, thanks to those VHS tapes that I used to own. I mean, sure, it is a little bit different than that of Hanna-Barbera's usual fare, but that is not a bad thing by any necessary means. Because this is not the first time that Hanna-Barbera has made an animated show that's different from their animated comedies or action shows, since they also made shows such as Devlin and These Are the Days back in the 1970s. Of course, both of those shows didn't really sit well with a lot of people back then, due to the fact that they were way different than what Hanna-Barbera usually did. And even though the show is different from the rest of Hanna-Barbera's other shows, at least it still manages to fit the tone of the likes of Johnny Quest, Space Ghost, etc. And also, like both Adventures from the Book of Virtues and especially Adventures in Odyssey, this show also makes use of quite an all-star voice cast, getting quite a lot of big-name actors and actresses to voice the different biblical figures that appear in the show. Some examples include Robbie Benson as David, Barry Bostwick as Joseph, Lauren Green of Bonanza and Battlestar Galactica fame as Noah, Ed Asner as Joshua, Gavin McLeod as Daniel, and many, many others. Of course, we also get Terry McGovern, aka Launchpad McQuack from the original DuckTales, as Derek, Darlene Carr, who voiced Shanti in the original The Jungle Book as Margot, and especially Rob Paulsen as Moki. This was another show that I actually enjoyed a lot as a kid, thanks to the VHS tapes that we used to own. While the stories are told very faithfully, it's also fun to see what Derek, Margot, and Moki go through while witnessing the different Bible stories firsthand. For example, the episode that retold the story of Joshua saw Moki getting separated from Derek and Margot after getting captured by the soldiers of Jericho after accidentally alerting them to his presence. The rest of the episode focused on Derek and Margot finding a way to locate Moki and free him, all while the time for the Israelites to bring down Jericho creeps ever closer. But fortunately, Derek and Margot were able to save Moki just before the city could be brought down. Then there's also the episode retelling the story of Samson, where Derek is the one who ends up getting separated from Margot and Moki after twisting his ankle due to an accident, that he ends up having to recuperate at a temple until he's fully recovered. But even in spite of these different interludes, the Bible stories still play out just as they did, and there's no sugarcoating whatsoever. At least the show gives us some pretty good comedic moments between the three main characters, most notably Moki, as I mentioned before. However, unlike Superbook, no mention is made of the characters wanting to return back to their own time after traveling to a different Bible story, which is actually rather depressing once you think about it. In a way, it's a little bit similar to that of Dungeons & Dragons, where each episode has the kids trying to find a way to escape from the magical realm, but keep failing every single time because of different circumstances, even if there was an unproduced episode where the kids finally did manage to get back home. For the greatest adventure, it can be assumed that Derek, Margot, and Moki were able to return home after their time-traveling adventures through biblical times, but they could have at least had one of the characters mention wanting to return to their own time in at least one of the episodes. Also, I feel that it was a real missed opportunity for them to cover other Bible stories like Abraham and Isaac, Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob and Esau, Gideon, Ruth and Naomi, Job, King Solomon, Elijah, Nehemiah, or even the Apostle Paul or the story of Philemon and Onesimus. It would have been interesting to see Hanna-Barbera's take on these particular stories if they would have been adapted for the series, but oh well. Then again, there's still a lot of Bible stories that VeggieTales never got to adapt even before the direct-to-video series ended back in 2015 with Noah's Ark. Though from what I recall, stories like Samson, Job, Elijah, and even the story of Zacchaeus were able to be adapted into the online fan series VeggieTales Live and Reloaded, which you can actually find here on YouTube. And not to mention that the VeggieTales show did adapt a few stories that the regular VeggieTales series never adapted before. And even though the series was strictly direct-to-video when it was first released, at least it finally got to air on television almost 4 decades later in 2024, when MeTV Toons aired it on Sunday mornings for about a year until it was removed from the schedule in February of 2025. It was nice while it lasted, though, in that regard. So in conclusion, I am proud that I was able to watch quite a few of the VHS tapes of this show during my childhood, whether it's from the tapes that I owned or the ones that I borrowed from the library all those years ago. After all that I said, I think that my decision is clear. I will give The Greatest Adventure Stories from the Bible 8 stars. Simple as that. But even though the show is different from a lot of Hanna-Barbera's other fare, it did not feel out of place with the company's signature style compared to that of Devlin or These Are the Days. It's still good that Hanna-Barbera was able to break tradition from what they normally did and try something different for a change. A lot of other studios were able to do that as well, sometimes for the better and other times for the not-so-better. Of course, this would not be the last time that Hanna-Barbera would create a show that had strong Christian messages in it, since a couple years after the first episode was produced, they would create the Christmas special The Little Troll Prince, which also made heavy use of Christian themes. And even years prior to that, Art Clokey, best known for creating Gumby, also helped out with creating Davy and Goliath. And of course, we all know about Adventures from the Book of Virtues now, don't we? Again, I have to say, The Greatest Adventure Stories from the Bible is still a great show, even in spite of the fact that it was produced by Hanna-Barbera, which was best known for Yogi Bear, The Flintstones, Top Cat, The Jetsons, Scooby-Doo, Johnny Quest, and many other shows. But as I said before, it did not feel out of place from the rest of Hanna-Barbera's usual fare. Sometimes, you just need to step out of your comfort zone and try something new for a change. Otherwise, if you just stuck to one thing, eventually people will just get tired of seeing the same thing over and over again. So it's good that Hanna-Barbera was able to experiment and make a show that seemed different from their usual input, yet was still able to win over a lot of people. Well, anyway, that's a wrap for this episode of Cave Cat's movie and TV reviews. As mentioned before, be sure to like and subscribe to my YouTube channel and hit the notification bell for more episodes from me or other videos that might come your way. So until next time, see you in the future!